Welcome to the Beginner's Guide to all things economic, political, and sociocultural. Here we'll be sharing quick bites into all the topics, concepts, and theories that we all talk about but should probably know a little bit more about. I'll be doing my best to keep it all unbiased, to the point, and hopefully interesting enough to inspire you to dig a little deeper on your own. With that being said, I'm your host, Emmy Davis, and I'm joined this week by
Jeremy Davis.
And this is the Beginner's Guide to the Federalist system. We're going to start today off with a quick pop quiz. Answer the following without looking anything up. Feel free to simply skip the questions you don't know.
1.
What is the name of the current president of the United States?
2.
What is the name of the current governor of your home state?
3.
What is the name of the current mayor of your hometown? Pop quiz over. 3 simple questions that most likely grew harder to answer with each one.
I'll be honest, I don't know the name of the mayor here.
Which is completely normal nowadays, and in a lot of ways, is not the reality the original framers of the country intended.
That's right. Today we're talking about the Federalist system, which is a system of government in which the power is split between the national and regional governments, each government holding a large amount of sovereignty.
This is what the Founding Fathers and the 10th Amendment of the Constitution set out to create. James Madison explained the idea that the federal and the state governments have separate areas of activity, and that the federal responsibilities are, quote, few and defined, and should act as a safeguard of the American freedoms.
The way the Federalist system decentralizes power and responsibility echoes Madison's sentiments. The systems break down power into categories designed to clearly define the rules in which the government could play.
The first is called delegated powers. These have been specifically assigned to the federal government in the Constitution. Some examples are the regulation of the interstate and international trade, currency, war, maintenance of armed forces, the postal system, enforcement of copyrights, and the power to enter into treaties.
The second is called reserved powers, which means that all powers not specifically delegated to the federal government are to be reserved or saved for the state government. These include power to establish schools, establishment of local governments, and policing powers.
The third is called concurrent powers, and is just what it sounds like. Here, both the federal and the state governments share power simultaneously. Some examples are the power to tax, maintain courts, and the ability to construct and maintain roads.
The last is called implied powers. These are powers that are not specifically delegated in the Constitution, but are understood to be necessary or allowed.
The necessary and proper clause of the Constitution states that the Congress has the power to, quote, make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers.
It's easy to assume that what we see and experience here today is no longer that original system they set up.
In a few key ways, yes. And in a lot of ways, no. While the foundation of the separation of powers is still largely intact, there have been numerous shifts in both what those powers are and how we as citizens think about them.
I would say a big reason for that has a lot to do with how the Constitution has been interpreted by the politicians and Supreme Courts over the years.
I'd agree. While the original form of the Constitution covered a lot, they knew that as time went on, that there would be a need to address certain things that they simply weren't able to foresee. That's why they allowed it to be amended.
With the separation of powers so clearly defined, how did we end up in a place where the federal government holds so much sway over the states?
A strong shift looks to have taken place around the late 1930s. The federal government began to use grants and aid to encourage states to go along with federal government initiatives. During this time, states didn't lose any powers, but the federal government began to gain more and more.
Okay, so essentially, since then, states were forced to play politics in order to get more and more federal funding sent their way.
And going back to your other point, more and more national laws and regulations were being passed. More interstate travel and a growing national identity began to drown out having a state-centric identity. And pretty soon, most people were thinking in terms of federal before they were thinking in terms of state.
At least, that was the case until now. The events brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic has brought back to the surface the original Federalist sentiments. A number of states have pushed back in terms of what economic and societal laws they will or will not implement, regardless of what the federal government says.
Totally. Additionally, you are seeing more and more people relocate to states that reflect what's important to them, which can only happen if states have the autonomy to look different from one another.
In a lot of ways, what we're seeing today should be a good thing. People should have the option to move to a place where their votes are reflected the way that they want. It gives space for more people to be happy rather than being in a state where half the people are supremely unhappy but have no options.
A good way to think about it is in terms of the free market. States having the autonomy to shape themselves without major federal involvement gives people a more diverse set of options.
And, like the free market, it inherently incentivizes states to offer more to the citizens and compete to be a better option for people to move to.
Exactly. Without getting too far into the weeds or too political, it's worth noting that the states who made their own decisions around the pandemic are doing better than others by a number of metrics.
The point of contention now is that a lot of people don't realize that states are acting well within their constitutional right, and that they probably should be doing more to get back to how it was before.
States, when acting on their own, have the ability to implement change much faster than the federal government.
If someone really wants to make a change that they'll be able to see and feel in their lifetime, they should focus on local, not federal.
Which is something that falls in line with a lot of the free market principles. Those who support a thriving free market explain that those in their direct community are best suited to make the decisions that affect their own lives. Even if they're acting from a self-interested space, it will still most likely benefit those around them, either deliberately or inadvertently. Or, in other words, people will sooner care that their town is a good place to live before they care whether or not a town 4 states over is a good place to live.
The federal government should be contained to dealing with international politics, keeping every state safe from outside threats, and aiding states during emergencies.
Whether they always like it or not, the people do vote in the acting governor of the state. Provided the demands of the people are legal, the governor should be free to do what they want with monetary and logistical support from the federal government.
All while understanding that a state may know its people better than those do in Washington, D.C.
I actually do kind of think so. Most of the issues that your average person is confronted with day to day can be dealt with on a local or state level. And most average people tend to agree when it comes down to those day-to-day issues. It's all the extra-large, sensationalized national political topics that get people riled up.
Once change is felt locally and on a state level, those citizens will feel heard and less disenfranchised.
So the moral of this story is that the separation between the state and the federal is a good thing, as it gives everyone more options and a chance for them to live in a place that closer reflects their values.
And think local before national.
Making it a free market of states, sort of. This has been the Beginner's Guide to the Federalist System, and I'm your host, Emmy Davis.
And I'm Jeremy Davis.
This podcast is a Subject Entertainment production for Free Markets Destroy, a project of the Washington Policy Center. Free Markets Destroy celebrates the power of free markets to tackle humanity's most daunting challenges. The world isn't perfect, but it's getting better every day thanks to entrepreneurs who work tirelessly to deliver life-changing innovations. Washington Policy Center is a non-partisan, non-profit public policy research organization that publishes studies, sponsors events, and educates citizens on vital public policy issues. For more information on either, check out freemarketsdestroy.com or washingtonpolicy.org. As always, thanks for listening and do your own research.